Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hideaway. Hope you're all okay. So in this video we're cracking on with another tool restoration, part of the series of tool restorations I'm doing. This one will be the vintage Stanley hand plane that a few of you have asked me to restore. So let's get started. From looking at the hand plane's lettering, patent dates and a bit of research, this plane is a Stanley Bailey No. 4 from the early 20th century. As you can see, it's looking a little worse for wear, but thankfully the majority of the components still moved and functioned the way they should. I did notice a small repair on the tote, but I'll get to that later. Other than that, this didn't look too onerous. But first it was time to dismantle and clean the thing. I've no idea the last time this was serviced or cleaned, but I was surprised by how easy it came apart. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a breeze, but I was expecting it to be a lot worse than it was. That said, there was one part that was really stubborn, and that was the frog adjusting plate screw. WD-40 did nothing, even a bit of heat, although not lots of course, wouldn't budge it. So I made the executive decision not to push my luck and left it in place. But everything else was relatively straightforward. So I cleaned the components in a few stages. Once I'd hoovered up all the gunk and old chippings after dismantling, I gave everything a quick going over with some meths. Then I used some WD-40 and a wire brush to help remove some of the surface rust. Then it was time for a rust bath. I used white vinegar for a day or so to get rid of the stubborn rust. Okay, so it's been a couple of days. Let's open it up, see what it's looking like. Wow, well that's worked really well. So what I'm going to do now is to neutralise the acid from the vinegar. I'm going to put it into a bowl of warm water with some bicarbonate of soda. Give it everything a really good scrub. Then I'm going to rinse it off with some water. Then I'll force dry it with a heat gun, and then once it's been dried with the heat gun, I'll then douse everything with WD-40 just to stop it from flash rusting. So let's do that now. After giving it a little bit more thought, I decided to give all components another dunking, this time in Evaporust. So I degreased all parts with meths, and then chucked it in the evaporust overnight. I know this was a duplication of work, but there were a few spots the vinegar didn't touch, so went with it anyway. In hindsight, I didn't need to do both, I appreciate that, but it worked pretty well nonetheless. Once out of the evaporust, I rinsed everything off with water and gave everything a good coating of 3-in-1 oil to prevent any flash rusting. Although I still had a bit of work to do on the body of the plane, namely some paint removal, I was really keen to get started on the lapping. So I set up a lapping station with an unused bit of kitchen worktop I found in my wood store. It was perfectly flat for this. I started on the side of the plane body. I glued down some 120 grit and then moved up to 240 grit. It turned out pretty well. I noticed the chip breaker had a flat square shouldered nut in it, meaning I couldn't lap this as I wanted to. So I focused on the leading edge, ensuring it was nice and flat. I did try and remove some of the micro pitting using the wire wheel though, and I did give it a quick polish later. Then I started lapping the iron. This didn't need too much work really, it wasn't in that bad of a state. I started on 240 grit. And then I got my diamond plates out, which were 400 grit, 600 grit and 1000 grit. And I used Windoline spray on the plate. I only used the diamond plates towards the front of the iron rather than the entire length. Now I decided against the ruler trick, which some people use, and that was just my preference. Once I was happy, I moved on to sharpening. And just a quick aside on the sharpening, some of you may think, why don't you save some time and sharpen the iron on the bench grinder? And you'd be right, it would be considerably quicker. However, I've never sharpened using sandpaper in this way before, and wanted to try something I've never done before, just so I could get some experience. So I gave it a shot. I used my trend honing guide to help set the angle to 25 degrees for the primary bevel, and then went to town on 240 grit. It didn't actually take that long to get a decent edge. At this point I still had a little way to go before moving on to the honing on the diamond plates again. And for the honing I used proper honing oil. Once the primary bevel was done, I then set the honing guide to 30 degrees for the secondary bevel, which didn't take long at all. I put a small camber on the edge to help prevent it catching when in use. I use a bit of extra pressure on the left and right edge of the iron to create the camber. Then use a strop with a little polishing compound once the honing was finished. And there it was. Fair enough, the secondary bevel is probably a little bigger than I would have wanted, but for the first time using this method I was pretty happy. And it was flipping sharp too. I moved on to removing the black paint on the body and the frog. I used a few methods to remove the old finish. I started by using an old chisel with a dullish edge to scrape off the loose paint. Then applied some paint stripper, waited about 45 minutes and gave it a scrub with a wire brush. Wiped it down with some meths, and then for the really stubborn stuff used a sanding drum on the rotary tool, trying to keep it moving whilst I was doing it. Before I started repainting, I used the wire wheel to remove some of the pitting on the lever cap. I then moved over to the sisal wheel with an emery compound to start bringing some shine back. Then changed to the denim wheel with green chromium oxide compound to finish it off. I then cleaned up and polished the other small bits of hardware and parts of the frog that needed polishing. In preparation for painting, I used some decent painter's tape to cover the parts that weren't going to be painted. And used a Stanley knife blade to trim the excess. Oh yeah, and I also did the lever cap too. I applied a couple of coats of primer. Then applied a few coats of this black metal spray paint. Once that had dried, I removed all the tape to see how things looked, and it wasn't too bad. A bit of touching up here and there, but not too bad. onto the handles. At first glance, they weren't in really bad condition, but they were quite dry. So I applied some boiled linseed oil to hydrate them before I scraped off the old stain and paint marks. Then I noticed a crack in the tote handle, so I needed to repair that. I didn't fancy making a new handle, so I was hoping a repair would suffice. I put the front handle into the drill press and used 120 and 240 grit to remove the old stain. And they turned out okay. I repaired the tote handle with some hide glue, which did a decent job. I then added a few coats of boiled linseed oil on the handles for the finish, and I thought it really made the handles pop. Then it was time for reassembly, but before that I decided to redo the lever cap with a red border around the embossed writing. I thought it looked better than the black. Anyway, onto the reassembly. I needed to reassemble the plane before lapping the sole, as that needed to be done under tension. Once it was reassembled, I prepped the lapping station with 120 grit and then 240 grit and went to town. Then it was time to test this thing, and it was pretty good. So that's it, everyone. I finally finished. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It planes pretty well, and now it looks like the hand plane it once was. It deserves that. It's been a challenging but fun restoration project. I've learnt a lot from it. I'm sure there are things I could have done differently or better, but I'm still pleased with the result, especially as it was the first time I've restored a hand plane. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, as always. And if you haven't subscribed already, please give that subscribe button a click. It really helps the channel. I'll leave it there for now and leave you with the final result images, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.